basically we always start this subject by defining the commodity. So like we are saying, as a real estate graduate, you are going to be dealing with real property or fixed property. That's the reason why that topic becomes important. You need to know exactly the nature of fixed property, how you define fixed property. At this stage, we all know that when we talk about real property or fixed property, we are simply talking about land and anything that is attached to that land. So whatever field you choose to be in, if you're a valuer, if you're an estate agent, if you're a property manager, if you're a facilities manager, you're going to be talking about that commodity, land and everything that is permanently attached to that land. So that is the starting point of most real estate discussions. That is the commodity that you are going to be talking about. That's where we started from. So you know also the different types, what forms a permanent improvement to land. That one should be fine. Then, most importantly, and I like this, personally I like this topic very much, characteristics of fixed property. We need, as real estate students also, why we need to think widely and say, what is so special about real property which makes it different from other types of property? Because real property is indeed different from other types of property. So real property itself has got very, very unique characteristics. And it's because of those unique characteristics, that's why there is this requirement that really for any person to be proficient in property, you really need to study. Because the way you treat real property is not the way you treat any other type of property, movables, so to speak. It has got those very, very unique, specific characteristics. So you are reminded, please, let's know these unique characteristics of fixed property. This is the topic which is not in the textbook, but it's in your given textbook. But this is knowledge that you need to be aware of. These are the fundamental principles of fixed property. So pay particular attention to those. We discussed in detail, I'm not going to be discussing in detail all these things because we've already gone through them. This time, if I were to ask you to discuss the characteristics of fixed property, I'm very, very sure you should be able to give me very intelligent discussions on all the various characteristics of fixed property. I like joking. I think I must have given about 11 or so characteristics, but you can think of as many as possible. Those things which make real property different from movable property. Okay. Is there a question? Yeah. So characteristics of fixed property, please, let's remind ourselves on those many different characteristics. One of the most important characteristics that I like about real property is bullet number 3. The property market is imperfect. Let me hear from you, since we are revising. What is our understanding of a perfect market? And why is the property market said to be imperfect? That's a potential exam question, a very nice one.
Because there's not a fixed price for a property. If you sell it to your cousin, you maybe drop the price, or if you sell it to someone you don't like, you will put the price. Yeah.
Market imperfection, not quite.
Isn't about interest rate.
No.
It's because it's so heterogeneous, it's so different. So it's not like you're selling clothes
Which are exactly the same.
Yeah.
That is one characteristic, that's one defining characteristic of an imperfect market. You know, in a perfect market, all the commodities are exactly the same. They are homogeneous. But property, like we said, is heterogeneous. No two properties are the same. For that reason, there is no standard price for property. So that's the reason why in a perfect market, all commodities are exactly the same, and that's why the prices are the same. So in an imperfect market, which is the exact opposite of a perfect market, all commodities are different. That is just one characteristic. So please, I want you go and revise the perfect and imperfect market. Know that it's very, very fundamental property economics. Know what a perfect market is, and know and discuss why the property market is said to be imperfect. So know the characteristics of a perfect market. Then the imperfect market is basically just the opposite of a perfect market. Extremely important. The other characteristic that is very interesting to, I'm sure you have seen for the rest of the year, is the last bullet, government intervention. There is so much government intervention in property dealings. You may have your property, you own it 100%, but you cannot use it the way you want. The use of that property is usually regulated by the local authority through the planning scheme. You can only use that property the way it is zoned, according to its zoning. And even within that zoning, you can only develop that property within the permitted specifications of the control factors. So that is just one aspect of government control. One way in which government controls property is through the Land Use Planning Act. So that is another very, very important characteristic or a distinguishing feature of real property from other types of property. I'm just picking the most important. The rest are also equally important, but you can build a good discussion about all of those. So what is most important there? Know what a perfect market is, and you should be able to tell me exactly how government intervenes in the property dealings. Okay. So those are the characteristics. Like I would say, please read widely beyond just the notes. You can think about as many as possible characteristics, those things that distinguish real property from other different types of property. Okay, then types of fixed property. This is also very, very obvious, but it's very, very important that we talk about this as well. Property can usually be classified into those major 5 categories. And why is this very important? It's because, as you have already noticed at this stage, you notice that the method that you are going to use to value any of those 5 properties is going to be different. And that's the reason why we need to be aware of that classification. So if I could ask, let's talk about that. What method of valuation do you use to value residential properties?
Comparable sales.
Correct. And number 2, commercial properties?
Income method.
Correct. Number 3, industrial properties?
Capitalization.
Mm-hmm. What method do you use to value industrial properties?
Cost.
No. Industrial properties, they are just like commercial properties. You use the same method, the income capitalization, the income method of valuation. Agricultural properties? I know we have not done all those things, but agricultural properties, you use a combination of all the different methods of valuation. Then special properties, know exactly what are special properties. Special properties, those are the properties that are rarely sold in the open market. And those are the properties where you use now the cost method of valuation. Yes. For those properties which are not bought daily, like churches, public schools, because there is no market value for those properties. So the value of those properties then is going to be determined from how much it would cost to rebuild that property. That's how the cost method works. Okay, so that topic is also extremely important. Those are your valuation profession. Any property that you are going to come across is going to fall into any one of those 5 categories. Okay, so that is also extremely important. So apart from the general classification, we also said property can also be classified according to their income producing capabilities. Those properties that generate a steady flow of income, you normally use, that's why you use the income method. Those that do not produce income, you use the comparable sales method. So that is on the types of property. That was what I think we was expected of us to know. Industry players in the property industry, that is also, we reminded ourselves of who are the role players in the property industry. We said there could be 5, the role players in the property industry could be classified into 5 major categories. The producer, who is usually the developer, then the consumer is the consumer basically. You and me, the person that is utilizing space, looking for space to use for whatever purpose. Then there is a regulator, the government. We've seen already how government regulates property transactions, so to speak. Then there is financial institutions. We say properties, one of the characteristics of properties that is extremely expensive to buy. So for that reason, there are not many people that can afford to buy property for cash. That's why normally everybody who buys property relies on financial institutions. They have to borrow money. And lastly, there is the middleman, the people now, the professionals like you, who now facilitate transactions, property-related transactions. So those are just a group of property players that you may find out there in the industry. So that was the first chapter that we covered. I don't know whether that was a chapter or how many chapters those were. But that was the first and introductory subject or opening topic for our valuation discussion. So what was expected there, basically, there was nothing to do with, that topic had nothing to do with valuation. It was all about introducing us to real property, generally speaking, so that we understand the commodity which we are going to be dealing with in the valuation topic itself now. So that is just a very general overview of what real property is, what type of properties there are, and the people or the professions that are usually involved in the property business. Okay. So please, I hope, I expect that all of us have a good understanding of that chapter. It's extremely important. Okay, do we have any questions on that one? This is basically revision, so I'm sure all of us are going to, don't expect much difficulties from any of that discussion. From there, we move now to the general introduction to property valuation. I think this, you realize soon, this was the major topic of our discussion. I should have probably next, I will even change my heading from introduction to property valuation to principles of property valuation. This is the chapter that explored most mostly the entire valuation syllabus. So in this chapter, I'd structured this chapter in a way of questions, and by answering those questions, then we will have explored the whole subject of property valuation. So that's why I called it an introductory or theoretical reflection of the subject of property valuation. So at this stage, let me probably get some feedback. I asked 5 questions on this slide. Question number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I must have indicated already that the rest of the subject, we are going to be answering these 5 questions. I want to hear from us people that are present here. Have we answered these 5 questions? Do we know the answers for these 5 questions? What is value in relation to real property? Have we answered that question? No.
I think we did because isn't it about the definition of real property and then the aspects in the definition about the open market and the arm's length deal, all those aspects in the definition is the value
Exactly.
in relation to property.
Exactly. It's about the concept of value. Ladies and gentlemen, we've answered that question. If we think we haven't answered, then no, let's go back to our notes. The concept of value, in the concept of value, that's where we were talking about the different types of value. There are so many different types of value. Personal value, market value, intrinsic value. But when we talk about real property itself, the value that we refer to is open market value. And we've discussed in depth the definition and the meaning of open market value. So we'll go through this, but let's go and know that. Then, what is valuation and who values real property? Have we answered that question? What is valuation? Yeah, I've answered all these questions. The third question is, why value real property? Why do people require valuations?
Because there's not a fixed price for
land
or
or property.
property.
Yes, but and then for what reason do people require valuation?
Mortgages, security.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Purposes of valuations. Exactly. So we answered that one. And what methods are used to value property? We've answered that one. So basically, this is now answering these 5 questions explores now the whole valuation 1 syllabus. So this is the summarized version of what is covered in this book. It's all about the concept of value. It's all about valuation, the valuer himself. So all about the purposes of valuation. It's all about what determines the value of property and the methods of valuation. And then lastly, from the methods of valuation, then it's the valuation report. How do you prepare the valuation report? So basically that was what is expected. And in this introductory discussion. So value concept, please let's know what value is. That is extremely important. Value, I expect you to know the general concept of value, generally speaking, and then know exactly what value is when used in relation to real property. Okay. Remember that. Value, generally speaking, know it, and then value in relation to real property. There are many different types of value. That is extremely important. Personal value, let's know what personal value is. You still remember that. Exchange value, what it is. Value in use, let's know that. Let's go and remember that. And most importantly, when we talk about value in relation to real property, we are talking about what they call open market value. I expect you to know this definition, please, word by word. Word by word. You should be able to define open market value. I'm sure at this stage we already know. Word by word. I don't normally ask questions where you, because we are not teaching people to memorize, we are teaching understanding. The only question that I would ask you to memorize word by word is this question. If I decide to ask you, you should be able to define open market value according to the International Valuation Standards Council definition. Because as a valuer for the rest of your career, you are going to be dealing with market value. So you need to know exactly what is the meaning of that market value. So please, that is a tip. Let's know that. So I also say open market value is defined in different words from place to place. What I've given you there is the International Valuation Standards Council definition. International Valuation Standards Council is the mother body that oversees regulates the valuation profession, linked to the RICS. South African courts have their own different definition of open market value. So let's see, that is basically the South African definition of market value. And what is also important now, within the South African definition of market value, you've noticed that I've broken down that definition into 4 major phrases. Those major phrases have got specific meanings. So the South African courts define market value as the amount which the property will have realized if sold on the date of valuation in the open market by a willing seller to a willing buyer. So you need to unpack the meanings of all those different phrases within that definition. When we talk about the amount the property would have realized, you should know what that refers to. When we talk about the date of valuation, you should know the importance of that phrase. When we talk about the open market, you should know exactly what an open market is. If I may find out. Remember, we are revising. What is an open market?
If enough time was spent to advertise, and also enough time to get somebody to buy the property.
Exactly. You know, the open market principle in a perfect market, the open market principle assumes a perfect market where all the products are homogeneous and the price is standard. However, we've already heard that the market for property is not perfect, it's imperfect because the products are different. However, there are ways in which the imperfect market can be made perfect, exactly like you said. So in property terms, the market is assumed to be open if the property has been exposed on the market for a long time. It has been properly marketed, advertised, such that many people were able and willing to make a bid for that property at that chance, such that you are selling now that property to the highest bidder. Okay, that's how the market for property is assumed to be made open. It's through advertising and exposure to the wider range of potential buyers. So please, let's know exactly the meanings of each and every phrase in that definition. Willing seller and willing buyer, we should know exactly who they are or what that phrase also refers to. That is also a very, very good potential exam question, this definition. Make sure you know how to unpack it, know the meanings that are associated. What did we say about the date of valuation? On the date of valuation, why is that phrase important in that definition?
Because that will be the value of the house on that
Day.
specific date.
Exactly. A valuation without a date is meaningless because valuations are dependent on market conditions. If market conditions do change, then the valuation for properties should also be changing. So the value of that property is going to be most accurate only on that date of your assessment. In a day after that, it may not be very accurate, depending, of course, on the market conditions. That's why a valuation without a date is meaningless. Every valuation should have a date of valuation, a date to which you are attaching this value that you are saying. If you are saying this, the value of my property is 2 million, so that 2 million is only applicable on, what's today, Friday 13. Depending on the economic situation, inflationary situation, that value could be correct for some time to come. But there are limits. But the concept is evaluation is only as correct as based on that date of valuation. And the evaluation without a date does not say anything. Okay. So market value definition, please. Let's go and know the different definitions, the South African definition, and then let's know the specific meanings of those key phrases in that definition. Amount it will have realized, if so, on the date of valuation in the open market. This, please take note of this one. The open market characteristics, pay particular attention to that one. This is connected to the perfect market question that we talked about previously. In the open market, so the general open market for a perfect product assumes a perfect competitive market, which has these characteristics. In a perfect market, there are many buyers and sellers acting independently. There is free access to the market. There is full information of market conditions, and usually the product is homogeneous. So you realize that most of these characteristics do not apply to property. That's why now the property market itself is imperfect, and strictly speaking, in its own sense, then can never be open. However, the property market, the market for property which is immovable, is only made perfect when these three conditions now exist, like we had. Reasonable steps have been taken to advertise the property. The property is placed on the market for a reasonable period of time such that every interested person must have an opportunity to make an offer. Then if these three conditions exist, I think there is another fourth condition. Look at your textbook.
Yeah, it is if the property is sold
Yes.
under usual conditions.
In usual conditions, yes. I don't know why I left that. That one is given. There is a fourth condition in the textbook. That shows people are reading. Go on. There is a fourth condition. That the property must have sold on normal terms, so to speak. That's how the market for property is now made open. Okay, willing buyer, willing seller. We should know you are not a willing buyer if you don't have money. For you to qualify to be called a willing buyer, you need to be financially and legally able. Okay. That is basically now the definitions, the value. So when I asked the question of value, this is what I was referring to. And that's why when I asked whether we have answered the question of what is value, basically this should have been the answer for the question of value. So value, first and foremost, you should be able to define value generally speaking. Then you should be able to give me the different types of value. And then you should be able to define value with specific reference to property, which is now open market value. And then give those definitions of open market value. So that's the value concept, basically. Okay. Give me the definition of market value by the International Valuation Standard Council and the South African definition. And you understand, can see you already understand the meanings, the specific meanings of all those key phrases in the definitions. Okay. Value concept is extremely important to valuation. That is a starting point for a value. Because for the rest of your professional career, you're going to be talking about value. So you need to understand what that means. Okay. So every time you are going to be determining market value for the rest of your career. So you need to know exactly what you are talking about and all its assumptions. Okay. So that is the value concept. Then next we talked about what is valuation then? What is valuation? And in the definition of valuation, I gave you the definition according to Millington. Valuation now as a subject is defined as an art or a science. Just want to talk about those two words. Valuation can be an art and a science. You need to motivate to me why valuation is accepted as both an art and a science. Do we all agree with that definition? I'm sure from your experience, in fact, you guys are already valuers. You already did very, very good valuation reports, practical valuation reports. I'm sure you can relate to what you went through in determining the value of your property. Is that a question? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You can relate to what you went through when you are doing that valuation report of yours. There was a process and then there was so much personal judgment. That's basically what makes valuation both an art and a science. It's a science because it's not thumb-sucking and it's not guesswork. There is a standard process and standard accepted methodologies that you need to go through. So at the same time, while using those methodologies, the end product, that conclusion is going to be your own opinion, which is going to be different from the next person's opinion. So there is an element of subjective judgment in the whole valuation process. That's what brings in the art aspect. And that's the reason why all of you guys, you could be as qualified and as experienced as you could be in valuation, and given a same property to value with all same comparable information, you are not going to come up with the same figure. That can be guaranteed. There could be some differences because you are going to make it's your prerogative as a valuer to make that intelligent, subjective conclusion. But that conclusion should be informed by knowledge. Yeah. So it is acceptable. That's why no two valuations are going to be exactly the same. So what happens then? Which of the five of us, how do you tell which is the most correct valuation? If all of us come up with different values. There is no correct valuation. There is what they call a margin of error. If our valuations are at least within the same range, then we are all correct. Normally, the theoretical range that's given, plus or minus 10% in differences in value is acceptable. But if it is beyond that, then probably one of us may have missed something. But a difference of margin of error of plus or minus 10% in valuation cycles is quite acceptable. Okay. So that is basically the most important aspect in that definition. Valuation is an art, and it's or can be a science. So that's basically the definition of what valuation is. Functions of the valuer then. If you call yourself a valuer, what is your function? Remember, as a valuer, you do not create value. That's what a lot of people think. As a valuer, your responsibility is basically now to read the market and interpret the market in order to come up with an opinion of value. That's why when I'm making a valuation report, the quality of the valuation report is judged by your market information. Most of you did very, very well. You gave me your comparable sales, you gave me your comparable properties, you discussed the similarities and the differences between the comparable properties and your subject property. And based on the price of the comparable property, you were able to deduce the most probable value for your subject property. That's the process. That is the way it should be. Otherwise, you as a valuer, you do not just stand up and say this property is 2 million. No. It has to be informed based on market information. And when we talk about market information is look at other properties in the market to determine their selling prices and then compare it. That is if you are using the comparable sales method, which is our method for now. So that is the function of a valuer. So a valuer does not create value, but uses a logical process of comparable analysis in order to arrive at an estimate of value. So the valuation process therefore includes, this is assuming all of you in your valuation report, you followed this process. A description of the property under consideration. This is a very, very summarized and overview of the valuation process. Then you gave your opinion on the condition of the property after your physical inspections. And then lastly, you gave your probable monetary value of that property. That is a general, very general, elaborate overview of the valuation process. So, in summary, we say a valuer does not create value from his head. Your responsibility as a valuer is to interpret the market, get market information, and use that market information to guide you with the opinion of value of your subject property. Okay. So valuation therefore both refers to the process by which the valuer reaches certain conclusions and the written report in which those conclusions are sought and justified. So after you've done all your valuation now, the next most important document you need to prepare is now the valuation report. That's now where you have to communicate your findings and your analysis to your client. There are so many different ways of writing valuation reports. Like we were discussing before class. Sometimes, depending on the purpose for which a client requires your valuation, you do not require to prepare a full motivated valuation report like you did in your assignment. Sometimes you can just prepare a statement of value. on one page. It's all about the purpose. But in this class, for academic purposes, we want us to learn first the best way. Then you start going to neutralize it as you go in practice. So in this, the whole of this program, we want us to learn how to prepare motivated valuation reports. You need to motivate your valuation report. Like you did in your assignment. That's basically how you prepare a motivated valuation report. There are one or two people within you, amongst you guys, who gave me the bank valuation sketches, those templates. That's not a motivated valuation. The banks, I don't know, I'm sure most of you have seen how the banks prepare their valuation reports. It's just a template where they just tick a few things and then they give their value. Here we are teaching how to prepare a fully motivated valuation report. In other words, called a talking valuation. If you write a valuation report, if you give it to the next person, he should be able to follow the process that you are following before arriving at that conclusion of value. That is, meaning that valuation report should speak for itself. You don't need to be there to explain it. Everything is explained within the report. That's basically what a motivated valuation report should be. Read this book there. Please remind me. I know I'm teaching valuation 2 and 3. I could be referring to the other textbook. Is it in this book where there are different types of valuation reports? Is it here or in the second year book? Yeah. But there are many different, probably in your prescribed textbook, introduction. There are many ways of writing valuation reports. Those who write one pager is fine, depending on what your report, whoever asks you to write is looking for. Otherwise, a fully motivated valuation report should cover all the basic details that we talked about. So valuation therefore refers to both the process by which the valuer reaches certain conclusions and the written report in which those conclusions are sought and justified. The key word in that one is justify. So the valuation report should justify most of the conclusions which you make. A motivated valuation report, there must be justification for most of the important conclusions which you make. If you tell me the value is 2 million, you need to now motivate to me why you think it's 2 million. It's based on ABCD. Not just saying 2 million, full stop. Okay. So that is basically what the valuation process is. Valuation process, we know, remember the evaluation process. This is the process that you went through. And I'm sure you've noticed already now why we normally, in all the evaluation subjects, we start with the theory, then at the end of the year, after we've covered all the theory, you are able now to get that practical assignment so that you now practice what we have discussed and then implement them in the form of the practical evaluation report. We did this in the beginning, which you were very much able to put in practice in your practical evaluation report. So this is basically the evaluation process. You determine the type of property and the purpose of the evaluation. You know where to get your information. You get the information. Discuss the general economic condition. You determine the highest and best use of the property. You determine the method of evaluation you are going to use. Then you estimate the value and you certify. So this process, we all know it by now. And in summary there I was saying, like I said in my opening remark, evaluation competently made can only be as good as the information upon which that valuation is based. So that's why market information is extremely important. if you base your valuation on wrong information, you choose wrong comparable sales, you're going to come up with a conclusion, yes. But that conclusion may not be the best conclusion for or value for your property. So that's where now the choice of information that you use becomes extremely important. So choose comparables which are indeed comparable to your property.
How do you know, like, I used Windeed, but on Windeed it still said it's a 3-bed, well, in Bethel I know the area.
Yeah.
So on Windeed it said that was a 3-bedroom, wara. But I know there's a spur where Windeed is saying there's a 3-bedroom house. So in the meantime, that house was demolished and there was a shopping center built
Really?
on that stand. But according to Windeed,
Yes.
there's a 3-bedroom house. So, but if I didn't know about the spur, I would have used that as a comparable.
Exactly. So now, basically, what now you do is, when you pick your comparables, it's always ideal that you go and inspect the comparables. By inspection is, I don't necessarily mean that you will have to go into the inside the rooms of the comparables. No, that may not be possible. But at least make an effort to physically verify that that comparable does exist. Just for those very reasons. Yes.
Okay.
So don't just pick Windeed and then from Windeed you do your desk evaluation. Whatever comparables that you pick from Windeed, make an effort to even just drive by to see exactly if those properties do indeed exist and there haven't been changes made to that.
I had the same problem. I had to inspect the comparable and the property was still under construction. So I couldn't use it.
Exactly. Exactly. So you have to, because remember what is recorded in Windeed is not, it's very general. So you need to know exactly what you are looking for. You need now, it's now up to you to verify physically to see if that is an ideal comparable.
The other thing that I saw is, well, Lightstone would probably be better.
Yeah, Lightstone is much more detailed actually.
But
Yeah.
on Windeed, then
Yeah.
some of the houses says it's a 3-bedroom,
Yeah.
2-bathroom, double garage.
Mhm.
But others just doesn't have any
Detail.
information on that house, so then you can't
Mm.
use it.
Exactly.
Yes.
Lightstone or Property Intellect are slightly much better than Windeed. But it's all about what you are, valuers, it's about what you are used to mostly.
Well, where I work, we have Windeed, and I was trying to register for Lightstone, but I was struggling. I don't know why.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, but you need to register and pay some subscription for that.
Yeah, for Lightstone.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that's basically the evaluation, and the accurateness, the correctness of evaluation is mostly as good as the information upon which it is based. If you use wrong comparables, you may come up with a wrong conclusion of value. So pick your comparables correctly. Okay. Do we need a break?
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Okay, let's take a 10 minutes break.